Thank you all for joining, and I hope everyone is able to be safe and healthy at these challenging times. This roundtable discussion is the start of the World Without Walls series of webinars hosted by the Palestinian Stop the Wall campaign. I am honored to be joined by such inspiring, phenomenal guests from across the globe to discuss today's struggles against walls of discrimination, dispossession, destruction, and the need to join in solidarity. Please welcome with me Vijoo Krishnan, Joint Secretary of India's Farmers Movement, AIKS, Bertha Zuñiga, Coordinator of the Civic Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations in Honduras, Copinh, Jamal Juma, the General Coordinator of the Palestinian Stop the Wall campaign, and we will also be having Sonia Guajajara later in the discussion, and she is the Executive Director of the Articulation of the Indigenous Peoples of Brazil. While we Palestinians have to resist the Israelis' ongoing Nakba, we also think of the interconnections between other movements and struggles around the world. Years and years of neoliberalism, capitalism, colonialism, and racism have made these interconnections more clear-cut than ever. How can we then analyze the current situation and strengthen our struggles to accumulate people's power? And how can we also build on this moment to tear down the walls of injustice? This is what we will be discussing with our speakers today. I will start with a quick introduction on World Without Walls, and then we will open the discussion with our speakers and guests. And of course, we will also open up to questions from you. So please send your questions on the Stop the Wall Facebook page or the BDS movement, and we will try to answer as many of them as possible. So World Without Walls came alive exactly 4 years ago as a reaction to Donald Trump's victory and his promise to build a big, fat, beautiful wall. Palestinian and Mexican movements launched the call for a world without walls, which was quickly endorsed by hundreds of movements, global networks, groups, and organizations from all continents. More than 70 walls that have been erected around the world. Israel is by far the world's leading wall builder. It has built a total of 6 walls. Such physical walls along borders or on occupied territory are only symptoms of many more walls of injustice we're struggling against. They are systematic, legal, or ideological. They may be in front of our eyes, or in the horizon, by our front door, at the end of the street, or even in our heads. Observing from Palestine the growing number of walls and the corresponding rise of racist, supremacist, and militarist narrative and policies, it seems as if the world is undergoing a process of Israelization. It's not then by chance that Israel is the ideological and technological model that many of the far-right, colonial, and racist powers are aspiring to be like. In fact, these leaders and political forces are as well enthusiastic admirers of Israeli practices and rules. From the supremacist right in the United States to India, where the Hindu fascist party currently in power has begun a brutal war against the non-Hindu population, to the anti-democratic pro-corporate government in Honduras, to Brazil, where Bolsonaro has developed his own brand of racist and misogynist ideology, the rising alt-right is explicit about being in alliance with Israel. Today, things may be changing. In Bolivia, we have seen a progressive government come back to power. Also, Trump is gone. However, the big, fat, beautiful wall he promised to build was only a symptom of over a decade of normalizing walls, exclusion, oppression, discrimination, and exploitation, and it still stands there. In fact, it is a problem when we need to be happy about Joe Biden winning an election. It is exactly these underlying roots, causes, and problems that we want to discuss. And we want also to discuss them with a vision from the outside of the walls of empire. This gaze beyond the walls is the moment where we can see the horizon, a world of justice, freedom, and equality that gives us hope and direction. Now, my dear guests, we will start our first round of questions. You will I will give 5 minutes to 7 minutes to each question. And I will start with my main question to you. Maybe we can start with you, Jamal. If we say that the wall of injustice are the structures and policies of oppression, exclusion, and exploitation, what would you define are the most walls of injustice that we have to break down, and also what are the ways that in your struggle, in this context, in the context of your struggle, the Palestinian one, what are the ways that have worked to face the system of injustice?
This question, I think it needs maybe 15 minutes to answer, but we'll try to make it in 5 minutes. First of all, it's my honor to speak. Yeah. It's my honor really to talk with this in this webinar with distinguished leaders from movements around the world, particularly the global, from India, from Brazil, from Honduras. Walls, I think the industry of the walls started as an industry, and the fashion around the world, it started from Palestine. In 2002, when Israel started building the wall of 8 meters high and around 800 kilometers long in Palestine. But this is not starting of building the wall. There's other walls that the Israeli occupation were building since the occupation started. The biggest wall that I think they start from the beginning to build is the wall of fear. And this is mainly to kill the spirit of resistance to the world, to make a colonial project. When you talk about curfews, when you talk about assassinating leaders, when you talk about checkpoints that humiliating the people, this is like the way it has been arresting the children. By the way, and lately it was in the last 5 years, we're arresting children from several places, particularly that there are ongoing resistance. And this is, aims, in fact, is to kill the spirit of resistance of a generation against. The conflict started in 2002, which is a turning point just in not just in colonization of Palestine, but as well as international wide. It became an industry. It became fashion for governments to oppress their people in, and they were like seemed like very what Israel was achieving in this war. In fact, the wall Palestine, when you talk about it and how it's shaping Palestinian areas, it has been contribute to this, to continue separation of the Palestinians, the unity of the Palestinian people. So within this 800 kilo walls, they create a clear apartheid system that they are. It's became now totally over, almost finished in the West Bank. To this from the north, from the south, from the isolate Jerusalem totally. So we have talking about 180 kilometers of walls around Jerusalem to isolate it from its Palestinian communities, which has become target for Judaization of the city. The other very disgusting, oppressing wall is the wall of Gaza, of over 65 kilometers of walls in Gaza that turn Gaza open air prison, one of the worst areas that you can think in the world. The walls, when they start like as an industry of, as I said, like exporting to the world. Now you, as Rita in the introduction were saying, like, and you have became like over 70 walls in the world has been built. Most technology of and technology and ideology of Israel behind the wall. You have the Mexico-US wall, you have Western Sahara, Morocco, Spain, Turkey, Greece, India, Bangladesh, Cyprus, Saudi and Yemen, Saudi and Yemen, Tunisia and Libya, Saudi and Iraq. So it became all this conflicts of the world that aims at oppressing the people in these countries. Moreover than that, even that comes along with it, and we see it in growing in the world. This is the super racist laws that Israel started when they talk about a state, the pure Jewish and more the indigenous people of Palestine, that they have the fundamental in their like if they are not existed, and this is a virus because this is going to be in a way to start cleansing the area. And we see this in the annexation plan that lately has been issued, when they suggested that they will give the triangle, which is an intensive populated area from Palestine inside control, they want to connect it to the West Bank. Then it became advanced more when Trump in 2017 came to the power, where he in fact represents, when he represents this fascist power. The main thing that and the most dangerous thing that he did is the destruction of national law. When he signed with this is a best example. So in 2017, when he came, right away he recognized you as a capital totally against the international law. Then he legalized the settlements and the colonies that they are building on the Palestinian people, and they are in fact replacing the Palestinian settlement built at the expense of a Palestinian. Every unit that built in a settlement or an outpost is in the expense of the Palestinian families, where they're controlling over the resources of the Palestinians in this. Then he came and also legalized the occupation of the Golan Heights, the Syrian Golan Heights. So he also recognized the authority and the authority of Israel on that area. Then after that, the right of return. The right of return is the fundamental right for the Palestinian people. We talk about 70% of the Palestinian people are refugees. So mainly he targeted the United Nations, the UNRWA mainly, that has been established particularly to safeguard the Palestinians' right, where he cut all the money that he's supposed to give to this, and this is trying to also to push other countries to do that. Then after that, it came right away. This is all context of what's so-called the deal of the century, which we called it the biggest the big robbing of the land Palestine, but it goes beyond the borders of Palestine, trying to reorganize the whole Middle East, expanding their imperialism in the Middle East, where Israel is the cornerstone for that. Where we see the whole normalization with the Arab countries, from Emirates to Sudan to Bahrain, and there is some others supposed to come after that. So in a way, what they were trying to do is denying all the right of the Palestinian people on the land, recognizing that Israel is the one who's controlling and who's supposed to be owning this land, and the one who can have its sovereignty on this land, while the Palestinian people is not existing in this way, or they have to accept at least to be like slaves in this apartheid colonial system that Israel established, where he recognized Israel on. So this is mainly in, I don't know how much time do I have, Rita, still?
You can finish your point, and then we can proceed.
Yeah, maybe I think in another question we can talk about resistance. And when we talk about what the Palestinians do versus this, like the Palestinian resistance continue, never stop since a century, not from now, even from against the British colonization of Palestine, and it's continue after that against the occupation after the Nakba, and after 1967 was called the Nakba, and until now, Palestinian never surrendered to this. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Jamal. For those who just joined us, we were listening to Jamal Juma. He is the General Coordinator for the Palestinian StoptheWall campaign. And I would like also to welcome Sonia Guajajara, who just joined us also. Sonia is the Executive Director of the Articulation of the Indigenous Peoples of Brazil. We're very delighted to have you. Also, we have Bertha Zuñiga, Coordinator of the Civic Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations in Honduras, Copinh, and Vijoo Krishnan, the Joint Secretary of India's Farmers Movement, AIKS. So, my dear guests, we were asking if we want to talk about the walls of justice as structures and policies of oppressions, exclusion, and exploitation. And one of the aims of this webinar is also to listen more and know more about other struggles and how they're interconnected with the Palestinian struggle.
Muito obrigada pelo
Sonia,
convite.
we're having Sonia.
E agradeço também a oportunidade de estar aqui. né, conversando com vocês e principalmente falando sobre esses
hablando
muros,
sobre
esses
estos
muros que nos
muros,
distancia, esses
estos
muros que
muros que
nos
nos
afasta
aíslan y nos distancian,
e esses muros
estos
que
muros
mais do que serem muros físicos, né, é uma estrutura, fazer parte da estrutura de Estado, né? Então, aqui no Brasil, nós mulheres indígenas temos dado passos importantes no sentido de romper com muitas barreiras, né? Historicamente, enfrentamos o racismo, o fascismo, né, o machismo, que sempre teve muito presente. E para nós, mulheres indígenas, né, historicamente foi dito para nós que era cultural não participar de determinadas atividades, que era cultural a mulher ser submissa, a mulher ser subserviente, né? Então, dessa forma, sempre tentaram nos manter afastadas das discussões, né, e principalmente das tomadas de decisão. A gente não conseguiu acabar ainda com, né, com todas essas práticas, mas a gente vem rompendo, né, rompendo muitas barreiras e ocupando vários espaços, né. Para nós é fundamental que hoje, né, nós tenhamos uma mulher indígena como a primeira parlamentar a ocupar esta vaga no Congresso Nacional, né, que é a deputada Joênia Wapichana, que hoje, né, é a deputada federal eleita pelo estado de Roraima. Nós temos hoje a Nara Baré, que é a primeira mulher a ocupar né, a função de coordenadora geral da COIAB, Coordenação das Organizações Indígenas da Amazônia Brasileira. Nós podemos dizer que hoje a Amazônia indígena é liderada por uma mulher, né? E eu fui a primeira mulher no Brasil, né, mulher indígena, a compor uma chapa presidencial, né? Então, nada disso, né, a entrar nas disputas eleitorais, né, que foi 2018. Então, nada disso foi nos dado de graça. Nada disso foi oferecido, né? Foi conquista, é conquista, né? De um processo de articulação e de luta que vem de muito tempo, né? E hoje eu fico muito feliz de ver que outras mulheres despertaram e querem também ser protagonista desse processo de mudança, né? Querem ser protagonista, né, dessa luta pela participação e pela igualdade, né? E no ano passado, né, olhando tudo isso, né, e toda essa luta das mulheres indígenas e trazendo cada vez mais mulheres, né, eu fui também a primeira mulher indígena a compor a coordenação executiva da APIB, e ali a gente conseguiu trazer, né, as mulheres para dentro dos espaços de articulação do movimento indígena, né? Começamos colocando a presença das mulheres, né, no espaço do acampamento Terra Livre. O acampamento Terra Livre é considerada a maior assembleia indígena do Brasil, né? É a maior mobilização que já acontece há 16 anos. E as mulheres sempre estavam ali vindo, né, com muita força, mas sempre compondo ou fazendo reuniões separadas ou reuniões paralelas. E a partir de 2015 nós conseguimos colocar a participação, né, a reunião das mulheres na programação oficial do acampamento Terra Livre. Até a gente conseguir o nosso espaço próprio, que foi realizar a nossa primeira marcha, né, a Marcha das Mulheres Indígenas, que aconteceu no Brasil no ano passado, mas que foi a primeira marcha das mulheres indígenas no mundo, né? E a gente fez essa marcha não somente para chegar em Brasília e dizer eu quero, né, participar e eu quero estar presente. Não, a gente fez essa marcha para mostrar essa força, para mostrar que nós mulheres estamos decididas, né, a entrar na luta para qualquer processo de disputa, para a gente poder ocupar os espaços de poder, né? E também mostrar que nós estamos sofrendo igualmente, né? Que nós somos as primeiras a sofrer os impactos das mudanças climáticas, que nós somos as primeiras a sofrer com o impacto, né, desses resultados eleitorais, né, como Bolsonaro, por exemplo, né, assumindo o poder, ele sendo um negacionista das mudanças climáticas, sendo um negacionista da própria democracia, né? Nós, mulheres, sofremos, né, logo o primeiro impacto. Porque quando tira de nós o direito territorial, quando tira de nós, né, o direito à terra, somos nós as primeiras a sentir esse impacto, né? Quando adota políticas de exploração desses territórios, né, de flexibilização da legislação ambiental, né, que autoriza desmatamento, que nega queimadas, né, somos nós que estamos ali. E mesmo no contexto da pandemia, fomos nós, mulheres indígenas, que tivemos que estar ali lidando com os doentes, com os enfermos, sentindo a dor da perda dos nossos anciãos, dos nossos filhos. Somos nós que tivemos que estar ali 24 horas cuidando, orientando, né, e ainda tomando as medidas de proteção. Então, a gente não quer somente ficar ali na orientação ou só no cuidado. A gente quer estar junto, participando e decidindo junto, influenciando, né, tanto na vida social quanto também na vida política. E para isso nós temos que buscar o nosso espaço, né? Então, como historicamente foi dito para a gente que fazia parte da cultura essa subserviência, né, nós tivemos que ir rompendo aos poucos, trazendo as mulheres, né, para dentro, como a gente sempre fala, né, saindo da janela e passando pela porta para estar no centro do debate. E a gente vem conseguindo. São pequenas vitórias, mas que para nós são grandes resultados, né? E fizemos um trabalho de incentivar as mulheres indígenas a entrarem este ano nas eleições municipais, né? E estarem disputando nesse processo, para que a gente possa ter mulheres cada vez mais ocupando mesmo, né, em todos os lugares. Sei que é uma luta que a gente nunca vai conseguir vencer sozinha. E é por isso que eu estou aqui e aceitei esse convite de estar aqui, porque essa voz das mulheres tem que estar sempre conectadas, tem que ser cada vez mais ampliadas. E nós que estamos já conseguindo dar passos importantes, né, que fazem uma diferença na nossa vida, nós temos que também pegar na mão de outras mulheres e trazer para caminhar junto, né? Então, nós estamos aqui para dar esse apoio, né, e essa força de nos colocar à disposição, né, de fazer um intercâmbio, né, com mulheres de todas as partes do mundo, e em especial aqui as mulheres da Palestina, para estar junto com a gente, ou que a gente possa ir também conhecer mais de perto toda essa realidade de vocês, né, para que a gente possa nos fortalecer conjuntamente. Ninguém vence uma luta sozinha, né? Ninguém vence nenhuma batalha sozinho. E nós temos que entender que nós estamos em guerra. É uma guerra permanente, né? É uma guerra permanente. Às vezes nós aqui não estamos enfrentando uma guerra com fuzil, né, com arma de fogo, mas as armas que nos perseguem, né, as armas que a gente enfrenta todo dia, essa arma do racismo, do machismo e do fascismo mata igualmente. Mata igualmente, né, as armas de fogo, as armas da guerra. Então, nós precisamos, né, sair desse cenário de guerra. E nós só vamos sair desse cenário de guerra fortalecendo as lutas coletivas, essas lutas conjuntas, e nós, enquanto mulheres, dando as mãos, né, umas às outras, fortalecendo essas lutas por liberdade, por justiça social e por igualdade. Igualdade de participação, igualdade de direito. E é essa a minha mensagem aqui hoje, para juntas a gente, né, fazer esse enfrentamento mundial, né, a estrutura que a gente enfrenta, né, abala, né? É muito poderosa, né? A gente enfrenta a estrutura de Estado, a estrutura do poder político e do poder econômico, né? A gente enfrenta isso todos os dias. E é por isso que nós somos perseguidas, é por isso que nós somos mortas, é por isso que as mulheres são assassinadas. E nós aqui, indígenas, né, fazemos todo esse enfrentamento na luta pelo território, somos assassinados todo dia. Porque nós enfrentamos poderes muito grandes, poder político, poder econômico e também o poder midiático, né? Então, somente buscando essa unidade, né, por justiça social, igualdade de participação e de direito, a gente vai superar todas essas batalhas e sair desse cenário de guerra. É isso aí, gente. Ó, nós estamos juntas, né? Me coloco aqui à disposição para a gente fazer trocas, né? Fazer intercâmbio, e essa troca de lutas para a gente é fundamental, tá bom? Território, nosso corpo, nosso espírito. Muito obrigada.
Thank you, Sonia. We will talk more on this unity and how can we effectively build these interconnections. But I will go back also now for Bertha. Bertha, shifting to the first question that we are discussing now, is if you can let us know what your take is on this, and what do you think, or what do you define the most important walls of justice that we have to break down today, and what are the ways, in your opinion, and that in your struggle and context what are the ways that have worked to face the system of injustice in your experience in Honduras?
Hola, buenos días y buenas tardes para todas. No sé si me escuchan bien, pero bueno, primero que todo, de saludar este día de la lucha contra los muros, no solo por lo que simbólicamente representan, que es mucho, sino por lo que pues materialmente significan en la obstaculización del desarrollo de una vida plena, digna, basada en los derechos fundamentales. Decir que, bueno, en Honduras, durante estos últimos años, hemos las caravanas migrantes, que son la expresión de la situación de violencia, de impunidad, de empobrecimiento al que también metido. Decir que para nosotras siempre hablamos de un desplazamiento forzoso, ya que las razones que están detrás de estas caravanas migrantes, que han sido muchas, incluso en tiempo de pandemia, pues tienen que ver directamente con la expulsión de las comunidades por la situación económica, política y de inseguridad social. Bueno, decirles que para nosotras esos muros están materialmente obstaculizando la posibilidad de encontrar una alternativa de vida, pero que también tienen que ver con esa violencia y esa expulsión, donde también hay una comunidad internacional de ese norte global que ha sido también partícipe de ese despojo y de esa brutalidad que se está viviendo en nuestro país, señalado también como uno de los países pues más violentos para hacer defensa del territorio. Bueno, decir que actualmente como Copinh seguimos luchando por la defensa de nuestros territorios como parte de uno de los pueblos indígenas en Honduras, que vive, bueno, ese despojo por parte de empresas nacionales, transnacionales, que quieren explotar los bienes comunes de la naturaleza que han sido resguardados por nuestro pueblo. Eso nos ha significado, la instalación de la violencia, nos ha significado la persecución judicial, la criminalización también para quienes defienden los territorios y bueno, son circunstancias que creemos que compartimos con todos los pueblos discriminados, invisibilizados, desconocidos por los estados. No solo desconocía su existencia, no solo desconocía su cosmovisión, sino también desconocía sus derechos como si no fuésemos parte de este país. Entonces, decirles que para nosotras lo que hemos denominado la causa por la justicia, para nuestra compañera Berta Cáceres, mi madre, quien fue coordinadora de Copinh, tiene que ver no solo con pedir justicia a un sistema de impunidad, sino de construir la justicia de los pueblos, fortaleciendo la defensa del territorio y visibilizando a esos actores que nos atacan, que nos despojan y que quieren matarnos no solo físicamente, sino quieren desaparecer nuestras luchas. Por eso para nosotras lo más importante es que frente a esos muros que son muy grandes, que son muy fuertes, como lo decía la compañera Sonia, nos queda un gran ejercicio de resistencia y nos queda un gran ejercicio de articulación de las luchas. Entonces, nosotras creemos y confiamos en la sabiduría de nuestros pueblos, a pesar de que es una lucha desigual. No es una lucha en igualdad de condiciones, porque los pueblos no actuamos o no resistimos bajo la misma lógica de violencia, de violentar derechos, como lo hacen estos grupos de poder que se quieren imponer frente a la vida. Entonces, decirles que aquí en Honduras continuamos a pesar de todas las dificultades y que también abrazamos las luchas en todo el sur global, todas las luchas dignas que se levantan en defensa de los territorios y de la vida.
Thank you, Bertha. Now we'll move lastly to Vijoo Krishnan. Thank you for your patience with us. Vijoo, I will repeat the question one last time. If you can let us know more from your perspective and your experience as the Joint Secretary of India's Farmers Movement, what are the ways that in your struggle and your context have worked to face the system of injustice? And of course, if you can also take us with you to define the most important walls of injustice that we have to break down today, please.
Thank you. Firstly, my support and solidarity to the inspiring movements being led by Jamal, Sonia, and Bertha. Truly inspiring. And we are talking about the different walls of oppression that are coming up. We have been part of the campaign against the apartheid wall in Israel and also the Mexican wall. But there are also many invisible walls, like you mentioned initially, that even in mines too. We have our own set of walls. Those could be along the class lines, along caste, on gender, racial, the walls that segregate on the basis of race. And all these are also reinforced by global capital and imperialism. We find in this time of pandemic, when you can only defeat it collectively, you find that certain sections, a few rich are growing richer and the poor are being pushed further into poverty. Hunger is reigning high in many of our countries, including India. Just during the last 10 months, in India, more than 150 million people have lost their jobs. So that is a situation that we are having. We have our own structures like the caste system, which is creating walls that deny opportunity, equal opportunity, access, and so on to the people of our land. So there are many such things which need to be fought. And these are reinforcing inequalities in our country, like elsewhere. And we are also finding a systematic denial of rights over land, rights for to food, and a right to employment, right to education, and so on. So that is something which we need to be united against, and very clear that these walls have to be demolished. And that is something which is very important. Today, while the pandemic has struck the world, I did mention about 150 million people losing jobs in our country. Hunger is in a big way. Malnutrition and starvation deaths are rising in our country. But the ruling classes are carrying on with the same neoliberal model. No proper health facilities, no proper food security scheme, no social security schemes. So all these are leading to a more debilitating kind of a system wherein the already existing inequalities are being further reinforced. And you find a few capitalists are even during the pandemic are making huge profits at the expense of the poor of our country. So these walls also are something which we need to collectively fight against. It is the fight against the pandemic, and fight against this unjust system cannot be just restricted to a few areas alone. In the last few years, especially in the last 6 years, since 2014, in India, you also have an extreme right-wing government, which is led by Narendra Modi, which is more similar to the Bolsonaro kind of government in Brazil. And there have been systematic attacks on intellectuals, on writers, on journalists, many who have been killed, attacks on the minorities, attacks on the socially oppressed sections. Women have faced the worst forms of attack during this period. A spike in the cases of rape and killing of women. All have been happening with the ruling establishment turning a blind eye. We also find a situation wherein the Constitution of India is being undermined, and the constitutional structures, the judiciary, election commission, the different investigation agencies, all of them are being controlled by the ruling party, and the force that controls it's the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, a fascist organization. So there is need for a broadest possible unity against against the policies being pursued by this government, against the different walls that have been built by the capitalist model of development, and need to work towards a more equitable society that is required. We have had many struggles over the last many years. Started in 1936, the All India Kisan Sabha is the largest organization of the peasantry, of the farmers. We have been continuously having protests against the neoliberal policies, against the policies of discrimination, social oppression, gender-based attacks, and so on. We also have a situation in our country today that the government is curbing all forms of dissent in the most undemocratic manner. There is total loot of the natural resources of our country, just like we are seeing a situation in the Amazon forests in Brazil. You have a similar kind of open loot being allowed here in our country. while the people are kept under lockdown, the doors are being unlocked for corporate loot. The hard-won rights of the working class are being snatched. Now, from 8 hours of work a day, they are forcing workers to work 12 hours a day. And whatever labor rights are there, those are also being snatched. So it is against such a system, an exploitative system, that we have to unite. And I am sure it's not just something restricted to India alone. It is a part of the global capitalist project, and we need to have build greater solidarities to fight against these policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So when we look at all these amazing and inspiring experiences from across the world, and we're seeing it very clearly how there are intersectional and interconnections between them, then we must ask ourselves, how can we effectively work together to build a world without walls? How can we together unite and work for a more just world? Maybe we can start with Bertha.
Sí, bueno, yo creo que esta pregunta es muy desafiante, ya que pues encontrar las maneras de articular pues nuestros procesos de resistencia siempre es una tarea muy grande y nada fácil. Sin embargo, bueno, yo creo que algo que siempre se reitera como una posibilidad es el de accionar de manera conjunta, la unidad en la acción y bueno, estar prestas y prestos a darle continuidad a lo que es esta campaña. Yo creo que pues en América Latina y principalmente en Mesoamérica hemos tenido pues esta claridad de pues luchar específicamente contra el muro que se ha intentado, bueno, que se ha venido levantando desde hace muchos años en la frontera con Estados Unidos para obstaculizar el paso de toda la comunidad del Abya Yala que va en busca de esas mejores condiciones de vida o de simplemente poder vivir. Algo que nos ha permitido también la unión con la gente en el mismo Estados Unidos, que también lucha contra estas causas antirracistas y que incluso está luchando por reconocer algunos derechos migratorios para la comunidad, por ejemplo, de Honduras, que a pesar de que no tiene un conflicto armado con ningún país, tiene tasas de violencia, de muerte violentas tan altas como de un país en guerra. Así que en varios lugares del mundo es considerado pues un país en estado casi de guerra y por tanto se sigue luchando porque el asilo político de la gente de Honduras sea reconocido. Creemos que, bueno, esperamos que con este cambio de gobierno en Estados Unidos esta sea una causa que se retome para en beneficio de la comunidad migrante, no solo hondureña, sino que de varios países del mundo que buscan el asilo, no solamente en Estados Unidos, sino que en otros lares del planeta. Así que, bueno, esta campaña creo que es importante, ya que en nuestro país lastimosamente no tenemos un cambio, aún tenemos muchas dificultades para empujar el proceso democrático que como sociedad hondureña soñamos y que esa concepción militarista, represiva, de ocupación de los territorios está muy vigente y hay intenciones de seguir expandiéndose. Así que, bueno, nosotras quedamos a la expectativa de darle continuidad a esta campaña, de que el mismo hecho de las denuncias las denuncias que hacen estas caravanas son una acción política también para visibilizar esas condiciones que están posibilitando o están haciendo necesarias estas migraciones. En nuestro país seguimos luchando también por cambiar esas causas estructurales que son las que tienen en condiciones bastante complejas a nuestro país en esta lucha por la justicia y reconocemos la importancia de internacionalizar nuestros procesos, de luchar profundamente por la democracia a nivel internacional, la democracia basada en la soberanía y autonomía de los pueblos, de los países que reconozcan sus nacionalidades, la multicultura que existe y que conforma no solamente una nación, sino también que conforma el mundo, que no puede seguir negada. Así que bueno, esas son algunas de las cosas que nosotras planteamos en esa mirada también de la lucha de las mujeres, que es muy importante para también articular los procesos de resistencia y de democratizar nuestros procesos internos y nuestros procesos de hermanamiento internacional.
Thank you so much, Bertha. Now we can maybe move to Vijoo. We stay on the same question and on the same matter. How do you think we can effectively work together towards building a world without walls, to see a more just world, in your opinion?
In the last 6 years, we have had the experience of meticulously building issue-based unities with organizations with whom we may have many differences in opinion, but building a unity around certain points of convergence. So we had a unity of more than 300 organizations for land rights and against indiscriminate land acquisition, as well as for community rights of the people, forest rights and so on. Similarly, more than 250 organizations of the farmers came together to form the All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee, which is leading the struggles against the neoliberal economic policies. And initially, this unity was just on two issues: demanding remunerative price for the crops and freedom from indebtedness for the farmers. But in the course of the struggle, we could expand and arrive at consensus on more issues. Also, a worker peasant unity, very rock solid unity of working class and the peasantry, that is also something which we have been able to strengthen in the last 6 years. So these experiences show us that there is need to resolutely resist all sorts of oppression, the exploitative policies of the ruling classes, locally, build solidarities with different organizations with a mutual respect for each of these organizations. And on the basis of that, there is also need to link with broader struggles that are happening outside. That has not been difficult for us because we have, from the early days of our organization itself, we have stood in solidarity with the Palestinian People's Movement for Liberation. We have stood with the struggles of the people of Brazil, whether it is the struggles of the working class for their rights in France or Greece or any other country. There has been a sense of solidarity that could be built, and also struggles in solidarity which we could have in our own country here. So I think there is need for greater interaction between organizations like ours. more such interactions where we can know more about what each of our organizations are doing. That is very much important. And on the basis of this mutual respect that emerges, since all of us are working towards defeating the walls of injustice, I think it won't be very difficult for us to unite on that. So I do think that the kind of solidarity that we have been able to build on the issue of Palestine, I agree it needs to be further strengthened, but we believe that your struggles are as much ours as our struggles are yours. So with that approach we need to go ahead, and that would help us to build a beautiful resistance across the globe against the visible and invisible walls, whether of bricks and stones or those walls in your minds also. I think that is the direction in which we need to go. We look forward to greater cooperation and more solidarity action between all your organizations in coming days.
Great, thank you, Vijoo, and I salute all these amazing efforts from India to Brazil, from Honduras to Palestine. Okay, then we move lastly to you, Jamal. If you can also give us your take on the last question on how you also think we can work effectively, if you have anything to add on our inspiring speakers on this issue.
Thank you, Rita. I want just like to connect the two things, part of the first question with this question. The national resistance, the Palestinian national resistance, particularly against the wall, is very connected. It is the popular resistance on the ground that the people is handling, demonstrating, standing up against the wall, against the destruction of their land, destruction of their homes, stealing their land, isolating it from them, and with the international solidarity. International solidarity has been translated, came out of by the BDS movement. Right away when they start building the wall, in 2002, when we launched our movement, start mobilizing the communities around the bank against those villages pass the wall through their lands. We start forming the popular committees there. Immediately, when we see what system that Israel is doing there, is clearly an apartheid system. The wall is a wall of apartheid. So the first thing come to our mind is the experience of South Africa. So we, inspired by South Africa, we launched this movement in 2005. Movement is the collective movement. Is like the wide representing the Palestinian people everywhere. West Bank, in Gaza, in Palestine 48, in the diaspora. So it's bring Palestinian people together, unite the Palestinian people behind the rights that we were calling in BDS. So this is what the strength of the BDS. Then BDS as a human rights movement that based its struggle on the basic Palestinian human rights that's supported by international law, by United Nations resolution, started widely the solidarity with the Palestinians international wide. So for us, it's like popular resistance must go along with the international solidarity. We identify ourselves people in our for our land that the occupation, Israeli occupation and the military is stolen. The action of our people, we identify our struggle with the indigenous people around the world. That's why when we in 2017, when Trump came to the power and started the war between Mexico and the United States, first what we think of is like the indigenous people on both sides. There where we launched together our movement against the walls, which is World Without Walls, that's now became widely around the world and became connected to the migrants issues and to other issues around the world. When we talk about international solidarity for us as a Palestinians, as we identified ourselves with the movement against racism, with the indigenous movements struggle. So mainly focus in our networking with the global South, and this is what I think as a Palestinian movement we were proud to advance this. We understand that. So in order to advance and to make solidarity more effective, I think what to do about our, and this is also we tried and we did in the 2 years ago in within World Without Walls, when we asked the different movements around the world who are suffering from the war to write about their cases. This is part of the raising awareness between the movement, between people around the world about the common issues that they are struggling for. The other thing we have to believe strongly is our enemy is the same. Our enemy as a Palestinians is the imperialism. Our enemy, the international powers, global companies, all those who's interested and benefited from their colonization and from the oppression that they put on us. It's the same in Latin America. In 70s and 80s, Israel used to be the hands of the United States in Latin America, who supporting and paramilitary, who supporting the dictatorships, the drugs trafficking. So they do the job. So they are not just like a cornerstone for the imperialism in the midst, but as well as around the world. So Israel is part of the system. And when we talk about walls as an industry that Israel behind exported around the world, which is benefited from all this fascist regime, it means like when we stand together against the system, against Israel, we also stand up together against the imperialism and those powers that oppressed our people. So coordination between us has to be strengthened. We have to understand about our struggles perfectly, and we have to build support to each other based on our common struggle, which is I find it everywhere. When we think about the stealing of the land and what the farmers is suffering in India, it's the same as in Palestine. The farmers is in the forefront of the struggle against the oppression and against the apartheid system and against the occupation. In Latin America, Honduras, in Brazil, it's all the same. Like this forms of oppression is exported to that country. They are training this regimes. They are in technology also to control over the people. They're exporting the drones. They're exporting all their means of oppression to the people. As it is in India, the same. I will say it again. Like in Latin America, also the indigenous problem is a problem of the land, of stealing their land. Mainly, maybe it's different than India, but it's from the global companies that's trying to destroy their community to take over their lands. So mainly going forward in this, and I think the problem is the pandemic, which is this is another story in Palestine, because Israel has been used the pandemic and the lookout to intensify their stealing of the land. More than 16 settlements that has in this year. Tens of thousands of hectares of Palestinian land has been confiscated. New settlements has been using the pandemic. So what we need to go forward with this, I think, is to together we have to sit back again and to put all the main issues in our struggle together and join our struggles. Without joining our struggles, win. And we have to understand also, when the farmers in India win their struggle, or when the Palestinians win their struggle, it's not just for the Palestinians, it's for the humanity, for all of our struggles around the world. I will stop here.
Thank you.
Rita.
Thank you, Jamal. I will start from that point, from the same point. When we say the enemy is one and we say the struggle is one, we're not exaggerating, and it's not a metaphor. The struggle against US military aid from Yemen to Honduras is the same struggle against Israeli aid from India to Brazil. It is indeed one struggle. It was such an honor, and I was very delighted to listen to all of you and your contributions despite the technical issues. And I would like to re-highlight one of the points that Sonia Guajajara has raised, and we can't, she's unable to be here because of the technical issues, when she said that even the margins of freedom that we are having today, these are not gifts. We struggle to have these margins. We struggle to have these rights. And just as we struggle to be as we are today, not just us and our ancestors, we shall also keep up the struggle to get our freedom and our equality. So I was very honored to be facilitating these very important discussions today. This was truly a moment in which we had a space to lift our heads, see beyond the walls, perceive the struggles of others and the connections between our struggles in order to gain strength and confidence together. The bigger the walls, the more cracks. And if the walls surround us, we should hold on to the certitude of hope that one by one they will be taken down. And while we the people, continue standing, they will fall. Thank you so much for also the unknown soldiers who've been helping us and working day and night, from translating to technician. And thank you everyone who bared with us and waited. Thank you Vijoo Krishnan, the Joint Secretary of India's Farmers Movement. Thank you, Bertha Zuñiga, Coordinator of the Civic Council of Popular Indigenous Organizations in Honduras, Copinh. We also know that you have also struggled in order to make these webinars happen. You, Vijoo, are quarantined, as I heard, and Bertha, you also, the hearing of the court of the assassination of your late leader slash mother has just started. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And please, save the date that this is only the first webinar of a series hosted by StoptheWall. The second will be on the 12th until the 16th. So you can have more details on them on the website of StoptheWall. Thank you very much. And I wish everyone a great day, good night. And thank you for joining us today. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much. Greetings and solidarity.